You have exactly 7 minutes before you regret the day you were born. That's what 26-year-old Serafina Dubois whispered to the flight attendant who dragged her out of first class in handcuffs. Nobody believed her. The passengers laughed, the crew smirked, but 7 minutes later, the laughter died. Because Serafina didn't just call a lawyer, she made a phone call that grounded the entire fleet and brought a billion-dollar airline to its knees. This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's a masterclass in revenge. You are not going to believe who she really was. The rain was hammering against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, mimicking the storm brewing inside Serafina Dubois' head. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. The merger had been grueling, a hostile takeover of a failing transportation conglomerate that had required every ounce of her legal and financial genius. Now, all she wanted was a glass of champagne, a lie-flat seat, and silence on the 7-hour flight to London. Serafina didn't look like the youngest CEO in the history of the venture capital firm Nebula Holdings. She looked like a college student during finals week. She was wearing an oversized charcoal hoodie with a bleach stain on the cuff, black leggings that had seen better days, and beat-up sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, held together by a cheap plastic clip. She approached the gate for Apex Horizon Airlines Flight 404. The gate agent, a tired-looking man named Gary, barely glanced at her as he scanned her digital boarding pass. "Have a nice flight, Miss Dubois," he mumbled. The machine beeped green, the distinct double-tone chime of a first-class validation. Serafina nodded, adjusted her backpack, and walked down the jet bridge. She could feel the vibration of the massive engines through the floor. She needed this. She needed to disconnect. As she stepped onto the plane, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The air smelled of expensive leather and recycled oxygen. To her left, the economy passengers were filing into the narrow aisles. To her right, the sanctuary of first class. Standing guard at the entrance to the premium cabin was Brenda Taggart. Brenda was a flight attendant who wore her uniform like armor. Her lipstick was a shade of red that looked aggressive, her name tag was polished to a mirror shine, and her eyes were scanning every passenger with the scrutiny of a border patrol agent. She had been flying for 20 years, and in her mind, she was the gatekeeper of the sky. Serafina turned right. Brenda's arm shot out, blocking the path. It was a reflex, fast and sharp. "Miss," Brenda said, her voice dripping with that specific kind of condescending sweetness that is worse than shouting. "Economy is to the left, rows 20 through 50. Serafina paused, too tired to be annoyed. She held up her phone, displaying the QR code and the bold letters, Han Wue. "I know, I'm in 1A. Brenda didn't look at the phone. She looked at the hoodie. She looked at the sneakers. She looked at Serafina's skin, her hair, her lack of jewelry. Then she looked Serafina in the eye with a smirk that barely concealed her disgust. "This is the first-class cabin," Brenda said slowly, enunciating every syllable as if Serafina didn't speak English. "We don't do upgrades on board, and we certainly don't allow passengers to self-seat in empty premium spots. Please head to your assigned seat in the back so we can finish boarding. You're blocking the aisle." "I'm not self-seating," Serafina said, her voice rasping slightly from fatigue. "I bought this ticket. Scan it if you want." "I don't need to scan it to know there's been a mistake," Brenda snapped, dropping the facade of sweetness. "Seat 1A is reserved for full-fare premium passengers. It costs $12,000 for this leg. Now move." Behind Serafina, a businessman in a bespoke grey suit cleared his throat. "Excuse me, some of us actually paid to be here. Can we get moving?" Serafina took a deep breath. "Do not engage," she told herself. "Just sit down." "Check the manifest, Brenda," Serafina said, reading the name tag. "My name is Serafina Dubois. I am in 1A. Without waiting for permission, Serafina sidestepped the outstretched arm and walked into the cabin. She found 1A, a massive private pod with a sliding door, and threw her backpack into the overhead bin. She collapsed into the seat, closing her eyes. She thought it was over. She thought she had won. She was wrong. 2 minutes later, the heavy thud of footsteps vibrated through the floor. Serafina opened one eye to see Brenda standing over her. But Brenda wasn't alone. She had brought backup. Standing behind her was the purser, a tall, severe woman named Nancy, and the man in the grey suit from the boarding line, who was now standing in the aisle, shaking his head with performative outrage. "This is the one," Brenda said, pointing a manicured finger at Serafina. She refused to go to her seat. She pushed past me. Nancy, the purser, leaned in. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." Serafina sighed, unlocking her phone again. She held it up. Nancy squinted at it. The screen clearly showed Serafina Dubois, Flight 404, Seat 1A. For a second, Nancy looked confused. The technology was saying one thing, but her bias, fed by Brenda's frantic whispering, was saying another. "It's a screenshot," Brenda interjected quickly. "Look at it. It's probably Photoshop. Kids do it on TikTok all the time to sneak into first class. Look at her, Nancy. Does she look like she dropped 12 grand on a Tuesday morning flight? She probably stole a credit card to book it if the ticket is even real." The man in the grey suit chimed in. "She was holding up the line, acting erratic. I don't feel safe with her sitting there. Who knows what she's on?" Serafina sat up straight. The fatigue was vanishing, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She recognized the grey suit now. It was Arthur P. Harrington, a mid-level executive at a rival logistics firm. He was exactly the kind of man who thought the world existed to serve him. "I didn't steal a card, and this isn't a screenshot," Serafina said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "Refresh your manifest on the tablet, Nancy. My ticket was purchased 3 hours ago. Direct transfer." "We have a problem with the system syncing," Nancy lied, clearly flustered but unwilling to undermine her colleague in front of a wealthy passenger like Harrington. "But that's irrelevant. The captain has been informed that we have a disruptive passenger who assaulted a crew member." "Assaulted?" Serafina laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I walked past her." "You shoved me!" Brenda cried out, clutching her arm dramatically. "I'm going to have a bruise. I don't feel safe working this flight with her on board." "That's it," Harrington huffed. "Get her off. I'm a Platinum Medallion member, and I'm telling you this is unacceptable." Nancy straightened up. She made a decision. It was the wrong one, but it was the path of least resistance. It was easier to kick off a young black woman in a hoodie than to argue with a screaming flight attendant and a Platinum member in a suit. "Ma'am," Nancy said, "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things and exit the aircraft." "On what grounds?" Serafina asked. She didn't move. Disruptive behavior, failure to comply with crew instructions, potential ticket fraud. Nancy listed them off like a script. "You can sort it out with the gate agent, but you cannot stay on this plane." "If I get off this plane," Serafina said softly, "this plane doesn't take off. You need to understand who you are talking to." Brenda laughed loudly. "Who are you? A SoundCloud rapper? A diversity hire? Get up or we call the police." "Call them," Serafina challenged. She pulled her phone out and started typing a text message. She didn't look at them. Brenda snatched the phone from Serafina's hand. The cabin went silent. Even Harrington looked shocked. "You can yell at passengers, but you do not touch their property." "You are not recording me," Brenda shrieked, looking at the screen. But Serafina wasn't recording. She was sending a message on a secure, encrypted app. The message read, "Code Black. Asset compromised. Apex Flight 404. Execute Protocol 7. Brenda threw the phone back onto the seat. Port Authority is on their way. The Port Authority officers, Officers Miller and Davis, were tired. They were used to dragging drunks and unruly stags off flights to Vegas. They weren't expecting a quiet young woman sitting calmly in 1A with her hands in her lap. Brenda met them at the door, spinning a tale of terror. She's violent. She's refusing orders. She might have a weapon in that bag. Officer Miller, a burly man with a kind face, approached Serafina. "Miss, we need you to come with us." "I haven't done anything," Serafina said, calmly. "I am the verified ticket holder of this seat. Check your system." "We can sort that out on the jet bridge," Davis said, his hand resting near his belt. "But the captain wants you off, and under federal law, the captain has the final say. If you don't walk, we drag." Serafina looked at the cockpit door. It was closed. The captain, Captain Richard Sterling, hadn't even bothered to come out and assess the situation himself. He took Brenda's word over the intercom. "Fine." Serafina stood up. She grabbed her backpack. As she stepped into the aisle, Harrington slow-clapped. A few other passengers in first class joined in. "Bye-bye, sweetie," Brenda sneered, waving her fingers. "Try the bus next time." Serafina stopped right in front of Brenda. The officers grabbed Serafina's arms to push her forward, but she planted her feet. She looked Brenda dead in the eye. The cabin was dead silent. "You have made a mistake," Serafina said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the cabin. "You think you have power because you have a badge and a uniform. But power isn't about volume. It's about leverage." She checked her watch. It was a Patek Philippe, though nobody had noticed it beneath the hoodie sleeve until now. "It is 8:14 a.m., Serafina announced. "You have exactly 7 minutes. At 8:21 a.m., the ownership of this aircraft and your employment contracts will look very different. You have 7 minutes to fix this." "Get her off!" Brenda screamed. The officers shoved Serafina forward. She didn't resist anymore. She walked the aisle, head high, past the jeering faces of the elite in first class, past the confused faces in economy who were filming on their phones. They dragged her up the jet bridge and dumped her into the terminal seating area like a bag of trash. Gary, the gate agent, looked terrified. "Cancel her ticket!" Brenda yelled from the plane door. "And blacklist her! I want a lifetime ban!" The heavy airline door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Serafina sat on the hard plastic chair of the terminal. Her wrists hurt where the officer had grabbed her. Officer Miller stood over her. "You sit here. We're running your ID. If you have any warrants, you're going to jail." Serafina didn't answer. She picked up her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her parents. She dialed a number that only 12 people in the world possessed. "Yes, Miss Dubois?" A crisp British voice answered on the first ring. It was Julian, her chief of staff. "Initiate the clause," Serafina said, watching the clock on the terminal wall. 8:16 a.m. "The acquisition of Apex Horizon. We were scheduled to sign next week." "Yes, ma'am. The papers are drafted." "Sign them," Serafina said. "Digital authorization is coming now. Buy it. Buy it all. And Julian, get me the board of directors on a conference line. Put it on speaker. I want to talk to the CEO of Apex. Now." "Ma'am, the price will be—" "I don't care about the price." Serafina cut him off. She looked at the closed door of the jet bridge. "I want the airline. I want it in the next 4 minutes." Inside the cockpit of Flight 404, Captain Richard Sterling was running through his pre-flight checklist. He was annoyed by the delay, but happy the riff-raff was gone. "Tower, this is Apex 404. Ready for pushback, he radioed. Apex 404. Tower, hold position. The air traffic controller came back. The voice sounded confused. We have a stop order. A stop order? Sterling frowned. Weather is clear. What's the issue? It's not weather, 404. It's corporate. We just got a flag from the FAA and Apex HQ. All Apex flights are grounded. Repeat, all flights grounded. Sterling looked at his co-pilot. What the hell? Is it a terror threat? Suddenly, the cockpit's ACARS system, the text messaging system pilots use to communicate with dispatch, lit up. A message printed out on the thermal paper. From Apex Global Operations to all aircraft priority. Critical subject, ownership change, immediate ground stop. Sterling ripped the paper off. Ownership change in the middle of the morning. Then a second message printed. This one was specific to Flight 404. From Office of the Chairman, new to Captain R. Sterling, Flight 404. Message, return to gate immediately. Do not depart. Law enforcement is securing the aircraft for the owner. The owner? Sterling whispered. The owner is in Chicago. Back in the terminal, the atmosphere had shifted. The officers standing guard over Serafina received a radio call. Officer Miller listened, his eyes widening. He looked at Serafina, then back at his radio. Say that again, dispatch. Suspect in custody. Correction. The individual detained is identified as Serafina Dubois. Status is VIP. Code red. The police chief is en route. Do not, I repeat, do not restrict her movement. Officer Miller looked down at Serafina. She was calmly checking her emails. Ma'am? Miller asked, his voice shaking slightly. Who are you? Serafina stood up. She smoothed out her hoodie. I'm the woman who just bought this airline. She walked past the stunned officers back to the gate counter. Gary, the gate agent, was staring at his computer screen. His mouth was hanging open. Ms. Dubois, Gary stammered. My screen, it's all red. It says, override by chairman. Open the door, Gary, Serafina said. But the plane is pushing back. The plane is not pushing back. Open the door. As if on cue, the jet bridge alarm sounded. The plane was reconnecting. Inside the cabin, Brenda was popping a bottle of champagne for Mr. Harrington. Sorry about the delay, Mr. Harrington. Just keeping the skies classy. Cheers to that, Harrington smirked. Then the captain's voice boomed over the intercom. It wasn't the smooth, confident voice of a pilot anymore. It was the shaky voice of a man who realized he might lose his pension. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We, have been ordered to return to the gate by the new ownership group of Apex Airlines. Please remain seated. New ownership? Brenda frowned. Since when? The cabin door opened. Brenda turned, expecting a maintenance crew. Instead, she saw Serafina Dubois. But Serafina wasn't alone this time. Flanking her were 4 men in dark suits, her personal security detail who had been waiting in the terminal for her arrival in London, but had been scrambled to the gate the moment the Protocol 7 was issued. Behind them walked the airport director and the 2 police officers, who now looked like they were serving as her honor guard. Serafina stepped onto the plane. The silence was absolute. She didn't look at Harrington. She didn't look at the other passengers. She walked straight up to Brenda. Brenda dropped the champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing cheap, sparkling wine onto her shoes. You, Brenda whispered. You're banned. I was banned from Apex Horizon, Serafina said, her voice echoing in the silent cabin. But this isn't Apex Horizon anymore. As of 3 minutes ago, this is a subsidiary of Nebula Holdings. She pulled out her phone and showed the digital signature on the acquisition contract. I own the plane, Brenda. I own the gate. I own the logo on your uniform." Serafina leaned in close. "And I have a strict policy against employees who assault the CEO." The silence that descended upon the first-class cabin of Flight 404 was heavy, physical, and suffocating. It was the specific kind of silence that occurs when the air pressure in a room shifts so violently that ears pop. The low, rhythmic thrum of the Boeing's auxiliary power unit was the only sound, a mechanical heartbeat underlining the terror on Brenda Taggart's face. Serafina Dubois stood in the center of the aisle. She hadn't changed her clothes. She was still wearing the charcoal hoodie with the bleach stain on the cuff, the leggings and the scuffed sneakers. But the dynamic of the space had inverted completely. 10 minutes ago, those clothes marked her as a target, a trespasser in the sanctuary of the elite. Now, surrounded by 4 large men in tactical suits and flanked by the airport police chief, those same clothes looked like a costume of war, a deliberate deception that had lured her enemies into a trap they couldn't escape. She didn't scream. She didn't rage. She simply stood there, checking the notifications on her phone with the casual indifference of someone deciding what to order for lunch, while the people who had abused her waited for the axe to fall. "Captain Sterling," Serafina said. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the recycled air like a diamond cutter. She didn't look up from her screen. The cockpit door was already open. Captain Richard Sterling was standing in the threshold, his 4 gold stripes glinting under the harsh galley lights. He was a man who had spent 30 years commanding metal giants in the sky, a man used to his word being law, but right now he looked like a truant schoolboy caught by the principal. He was sweating, a bead of perspiration tracing a path down his temple. Miss Dubois," Sterling stammered, his eyes darting between Serafina and the armed security detail blocking the exit. I have a flight to prep. We are already behind schedule." "You have no flight," Serafina corrected him, finally looking up. Her eyes were dark, calm, and terrifyingly empty of empathy. "The schedule is irrelevant. The destination is irrelevant. The only thing that matters right now is the truth. Please, step into the cabin." "I cannot leave the flight deck unattended during active ops," Sterling tried to cite protocol, clutching his checklist like a shield. "Captain," Serafina said, taking a step forward, "I just bought the fuel in your wings. I bought the lease on this gate. I bought the debt on this aircraft's fuselage. If I tell you to step into the cabin, you will step into the cabin, or I will have you removed for insubordination. Do not make me repeat myself." Sterling crumbled. He stepped out, removing his hat, clutching it to his chest with white-knuckled hands. He stood next to Brenda, who was trembling so violently that her name tag was vibrating against her uniform. Serafina turned to Kane, her head of security. "Kane, is the patch ready?" "Yes, ma'am," Kane replied, his voice a deep baritone. He was holding a tablet connected via a hard line to the purser's station. "We have hijacked the in-flight entertainment system. Audio and video from the first-class cabin are now being broadcast live to every screen in the aircraft, including economy." "Good," Serafina said. "I want the jury to see the evidence." A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin. Arthur P. Harrington, the man in the grey suit in seat 2A, nearly choked on his champagne. "Now see here," he sputtered, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "You cannot broadcast us. This is a violation of privacy. I demand you turn that off." Serafina turned to him slowly. "Mr. Harrington, you were quite vocal about your desire for a public safety intervention earlier. You wanted an audience when I was being dragged out. Why are you so shy now?" She picked up the PA handset, the spiral cord stretching taut. She looked into the camera lens embedded in the bulkhead wall, the one usually used for safety demos. "Ladies and gentlemen, in rows 20 through 50, Serafina spoke, her voice amplified through the entire plane. "My name is Serafina Dubois. I apologize for the delay. You are currently watching a live performance review. 10 minutes ago, I was removed from this aircraft because I didn't look the part. I have returned because I now own the part, and the plane, and the airline." From the back of the plane, even through the heavy curtains, a muffled roar of shock and excitement could be heard. Serafina dropped the handset and turned her attention to Brenda. "Let's begin," Serafina said, pacing slowly back and forth in front of row 1. "Brenda Taggart, employee number 04922, 20 years of service." I didn't know," Brenda whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her foundation. "I swear, if I had known who you were—" "Stop," Serafina said, holding up a hand. "That is the wrong answer. That is the worst possible answer you could have given." Serafina stepped into Brenda's personal space. The flight attendant flinched. "You are saying that if you knew I was a billionaire, you would have treated me with respect?" Serafina asked, tilting her head. "So, your respect is conditional? It's a transaction? You only offer dignity to people you think can hurt you?" "No, it's policy to check for upgrades," Brenda cried. "You were blocking the aisle. You were wearing a hoodie. It looked suspicious." "Suspicious," Serafina repeated the word, tasting it. "Let's pass that. What is suspicious about a hoodie? Is it the cotton blend, the zipper, or is it the person wearing it?" "You know what I mean," Brenda snapped, her old defensive reflexes kicking in. "We have rules. You didn't belong in seat 1A. "I had a ticket," Serafina said calmly. "A verified, full fare ticket. You refused to look at it. You refused to scan it. You saw a young black woman in comfortable clothes, and your brain decided criminal before it decided customer. And then you escalated. You called the police on a paying customer because your ego couldn't handle being wrong." Serafina turned to Nancy, the purser, who was pressing herself against the galley wall, trying to become two-dimensional. "Nancy," Serafina said, "you are the purser, the lead. You outrank Brenda. Why didn't you stop her?" She said you were violent," Nancy squeaked. "She said you shoved her. Did you see me shove her?" "No, but did you check the cameras?" "There wasn't time." "There is always time for the truth, Nancy," Serafina said, disappointed. "You are a leader, but you let a bully run your cabin because it was easier than confrontation. You prioritized your coffee break over a passenger's civil rights." Serafina then pivoted on her heel, facing the man in 2A, Arthur P. Harrington. He was trying to look busy on his phone, but his thumbs were hovering uselessly over the screen. "And now, the star witness," Serafina said, walking over to his seat. She loomed over him. "Mr. Harrington, you slow clapped. You remember that? You clapped while I was being handcuffed." Harrington lowered his phone. He tried to summon the corporate arrogance that usually worked for him in boardrooms. "Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I spend $100,000 a year with this airline. I have a right to a peaceful flight without drama." "Drama?" Serafina laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You created the drama, Arthur. You inserted yourself into a situation that had nothing to do with you because you wanted to feel powerful. You piled on." She pulled her own tablet out of her backpack. "Arthur P. Harrington," she read aloud, "Senior Vice President of North American Sales for Omni Global Logistics. Married, 2 kids in private school in Connecticut. currently travelling to London to close the Project Vesta deal. Harrington went pale. How? That's confidential corporate information. Nothing is confidential when you finance the bank that holds the debt. Serafina smiled thinly. My firm, Nebula Holdings, owns a 15% controlling stake in the underwriting firm for your company's fleet insurance. Essentially, Arthur, I pay for the trucks you sell. Harrington's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I'm looking at your company's ethics charter, Serafina continued, scrolling with her finger. It's very specific about reputational risk. It says here that any executive found to be engaging in discriminatory, harassing, or publicly embarrassing behavior is subject to immediate termination. This is a private flight, Harrington hissed. You can't prove anything. Kane, Serafina said. Play the clip. On the massive high-definition screen in front of Harrington, and on every screen in economy, a video began to play. It was footage from the cabin security camera, which Serafina's team had remotely accessed minutes ago. The video showed Serafina standing calmly. It showed Brenda screaming, and it showed Harrington, face twisted in a sneer, yelling, "Get her off! I don't feel safe! Who knows what she's on?" followed by his enthusiastic applause as the police dragged her away. The cabin was silent as the video ended. The passengers in economy are watching that right now, Serafina said. And in about 5 minutes, that clip will be on the desk of your CEO, Marcus Thorne. I know Marcus. We golf at the same club. He hates bad press. He hates it more than he likes you. Harrington dropped his phone. It clattered onto the floor. Please, he whispered, his bravado vanishing instantly. Please don't. I have a mortgage. My daughter is starting Yale in the fall. You should have thought about your daughter before you cheered for the humiliation of someone else's daughter, Serafina said coldly. You wanted to be the judge, Arthur. You wanted to sit in your big seat and decide who belongs and who doesn't. Well, now the court is in session, and you are the one on trial. She turned back to Captain Sterling. Captain, you are the final failure, she said. You have the ultimate authority. You could have walked out here. You could have asked me for my ticket. You could have de-escalated. Instead, you took the word of a bigot and the complaints of a narcissist, and you weaponized the police against me. You broke the most sacred rule of command. Trust, but verify. Sterling looked down at his shoes. I just wanted to take off on time. And that is why you will never command a heavy jet again, Serafina said. You traded your integrity for an on-time departure metric. The cabin felt small, the luxury finishes, the wood grain, the soft leather, the champagne flutes, felt like a facade that had been stripped away to reveal the ugly rot underneath. Serafina walked back to the front of the cabin. She looked at the three of them, the bully, the coward, and the bystander. You all made a calculation, Serafina said, her voice addressing the room, but meant for the world. You looked at me and you saw zero value. You saw a zero, but you forgot that in mathematics, a zero has the power to multiply everything it touches, or delete it. She turned to Kane. Cut the feed to economy, she ordered. The trial is over. It's time for the sentencing. Kane tapped the tablet. The screens in the cabin flickered back to the airline logo. Serafina took a deep breath. The adrenaline was high, but her hand was steady. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone. Who are you calling? Brenda asked, her voice trembling. I'm calling the tower, Serafina said. To clear our flight plan. We are going to London. She paused, her thumb hovering over the dial button. But we are going to be lighter on fuel burn, she added, looking at Harrington and Brenda. because we are going to be shedding some weight before we depart." The doors of the jet bridge were still open. The cool air of the terminal wafted in, smelling of jet fuel and Judgment Day. Serafina Dubois was done talking. It was time for the karma to hit, and it was going to hit with the force of a 747. The phrase immediate termination is usually a metaphor in the corporate world. It usually means a meeting, a severance package, and a quiet exit 2 weeks later. Serafina Dubois did not deal in metaphors. "Brenda Taggart," Serafina said, her voice echoing through the silent plane. "As of this moment, your employment with this airline is terminated for cause. The cause is gross misconduct, assault of a passenger, and violation of civil rights." Brenda gasped, her knees buckling. "You can't do that. The union has already been emailed the video evidence of you grabbing me and shoving me." Serafina cut her off. "They won't touch you." But that's not all. Serafina leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "I am pressing charges for assault. The police officers waiting outside aren't here for me anymore. They are here for you." Brenda looked at the door. Officers Miller and Davis were back. They weren't looking at Serafina with suspicion anymore. They were holding a pair of zip ties. "Brenda Taggart," Officer Miller said, stepping onto the plane. "Please stand up and turn around." "No," Brenda wailed. "I've worked here for 20 years. You can't take my pension." "You lost your pension when you put your hands on me," Serafina said coldly. "Get her off my plane." The entire cabin watched as the woman who had sneered at Serafina was handcuffed, weeping, and marched down the aisle she had claimed to protect. The economy cabin, watching on the screens, erupted into applause. Someone shouted, "Bye, Karen." Serafina didn't smile. She turned to Captain Sterling. "Captain, you are relieved of command effectively immediately," she said. "You are suspended pending a full investigation into your command decisions. You will grab your kit bag and leave the cockpit. A replacement crew is already being ferried from the reserve lounge. You will not fly for this airline, or likely any airline, ever again." Sterling looked like he was going to vomit. He stripped off his epaulets, the 4 stripes he had worked decades for, and threw them on the floor. He walked out, head down, defeated. Finally, Serafina turned to Arthur Harrington. He was typing furiously on his phone, likely trying to call his boss before Serafina did. "Put the phone away, Arthur," Serafina said. "It's too late." "You can't fire me," Harrington spat, though he looked terrified. "I don't work for you." "No," Serafina agreed. "But I just got off the phone with your CEO, Marcus Thorne. I told him that I was reconsidering the financing for Omni Global because I don't like the company they keep. I told him that his VP of sales was creating a liability disaster on a public flight." Harrington's phone rang. The caller ID said, "The boss." He stared at it, paralyzed. "Answer it," Serafina commanded. He answered on speaker, his hand shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. "Mr. Thorne?" "Arthur." The voice on the other end was ice cold. "Pack your desk. You are done. We are sending legal over to your house to retrieve the company car and laptop. Do not come into the office." "But sir, you embarrassed us, Arthur, and you pissed off the wrong woman. You're fired." The line went dead. Harrington sat there, the silence ringing in his ears. He had lost his job, his status, and his reputation in under 3 minutes. "Mr. Harrington," Serafina said, "this is first class. It is reserved for premium passengers and business professionals. Since you are currently unemployed, and your corporate card has likely been cancelled in the last 30 seconds, you can no longer afford this seat." "You're kicking me off?" he whispered. "Oh no," Serafina smiled, a dangerous, shark-like smile. "I'm not heartless. I'm not going to strand you in New York. You still have a ticket to London." She pointed to the back of the plane. Seat 54E is open. It's a middle seat, right next to the lavatory. I hear the recline is broken. Harrington stared at her. You can't be serious. You have 10 seconds to move, Serafina said, checking her watch, or I have you removed for trespassing. Your choice. Harrington stood up. He grabbed his briefcase. His face was a beet-red mixture of shame and rage. He walked out of the first-class pod. The walk of shame was brutal. As he passed through the curtain into economy, the passengers who had seen everything on the screens turned to look at him. These were the people he had sneered at earlier. Now he had to squeeze down the narrow aisle, bumping into elbows, muttering apologies. "Welcome to the back, fancy pants," a teenager yelled. Harrington reached row 54. It was indeed right next to the toilet. The smell of blue chemical sanitizer was strong. He shoved his bag under the seat and squeezed into the middle seat between a large man eating a tuna sandwich and a crying toddler. Back in first class, Serafina let out a long breath. She felt the adrenaline crashing. Nancy, the purser, was the last one left standing. She was trembling, holding a tray of orange juice. "Miss Dubois," Nancy whispered, Am I fired too?" Serafina looked at her. She saw a woman who was weak, a follower, but not necessarily malicious, just afraid of confrontation. "No, Nancy," Serafina said softly. "You aren't fired, but you are going to retraining. And for this flight?" "Yes, Mum." "You are going to work in economy," Serafina said. "Go to the back and help serve the passengers. I'm promoting the junior flight attendant, Sarah, to work first class today." She was the only one who tried to tell Brenda to stop. Nancy nodded vigorously. Thank you so much." She scurried to the back. Serafina looked at the empty cabin. It was quiet. It was hers. She walked back to seat 1A. Her backpack was still there. She sat down, sinking into the plush leather that she had fought so hard for. A young flight attendant, Sarah, timidly peeked through the curtain. She had wide eyes. "Ms. Dubois?" Sarah asked. "The new flight deck crew is on board. They are ready to go in 10 minutes. Can I get you anything?" Serafina looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the tarmac. "Just a water, Sarah," Serafina said. "And maybe tell the passengers in economy that drinks are on me today." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah beamed. As the plane pushed back, Serafina pulled up the window shade. She saw Brenda standing on the curb outside with her box of belongings, arguing with a police officer. She saw Arthur Harrington's silhouette in the back of the plane, miserable in 54E. She closed her eyes. The merger was done. The airline was hers, and the lesson had been taught. But as the engines roared to life, Serafina knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message that would travel faster than the plane itself. She opened her laptop. She had one more email to send. 2. Global Press Office. Subject: A new era for Apex Horizon. She began to type. The story was far from over. In fact, the real work was just beginning. The flight to London was the smoothest 7 hours in the history of aviation. The turbulence over the Atlantic seemed to part like the Red Sea for Serafina Dubois. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had undergone a radical transformation. Sarah, the young flight attendant promoted to first class, worked with a nervous but joyful energy. She treated every passenger with genuine warmth, a stark contrast to the militaristic regime of Brenda. In the back of the plane, in seat 54E, Arthur P. Harrington was living through his own personal purgatory. His legs were cramped. The toddler beside him had spilled apple juice on his tailored Italian trousers. He had no Wi-Fi, as Serafina had instructed the crew to disable his specific device's Mackie address from the network. He sat in silence, stewing in his humiliation, unable to check the stock market or call his lawyer. He was just a man in a middle seat, stripped of his armor. When the wheels of the massive Boeing touched down at Heathrow, the brakes didn't just signal the end of a journey, they signaled the beginning of a war. The plane taxied to the gate. Usually, first class deplanes first. But as the seatbelt sign dinged off, Serafina stood up and raised her hand. "Wait," she said softly to the first-class cabin. She walked back to the curtain, separating the classes. She opened it. "Economy passengers," Serafina announced, her voice carrying over the surprised murmurs. "You may deplane first today. Thank you for your patience." A cheer went up from the back. The tired families, the students, the elderly couples, they all grabbed their bags and streamed past the bewildered elite in the front. As Arthur Harrington trudged past Serafina, clutching his juice-stained bag, he refused to look her in the eye. "Have a productive day, Arthur," Serafina said pleasantly. He didn't reply. He rushed out the door, desperate to escape. But as he stepped onto the jet bridge and into the terminal, he realized the nightmare wasn't over. Flashes of light blinded him. Serafina hadn't just emailed the press office. She had leaked the story to every major news outlet in London and New York. The headline was already trending on Twitter, X, "Dachau flight for justice." Reporters were swarming at the gate. But they weren't there for Serafina yet. They were there for the rude executive and the racist flight attendant. Video footage from inside the plane, taken by the passengers Serafina had defended, had already gone viral. It showed Harrington slow clapping. It showed Brenda dragging Serafina. It had 40 million views in 6 hours. Harrington covered his face with his briefcase, pushing through the paparazzi like a criminal leaving a courthouse. His career wasn't just over, he was a global meme. Brenda was brought off the plane last, escorted by British police who had been coordinated with the NYPD. She wasn't just fired, she was facing charges for violating international aviation conduct laws. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked small, bitter, and utterly defeated. Finally, Serafina emerged. She walked out of the gate wearing the same hoodie, the same leggings, the same sneakers. She didn't look like a billionaire conqueror. She looked like a woman who was tired of being underestimated. A BBC reporter thrust a microphone in her face. "Ms. Dubois, you just bought an entire airline mid-flight to settle a grievance. Is that true? Do you plan to keep it?" Serafina stopped. The cameras clicked furiously. "I didn't buy it to settle a grievance," Serafina said, her voice steady. "I bought it to set a standard. Apex Horizon has forgotten that it is a service industry. They forgot that dignity is not a premium feature you pay extra for. It is the baseline." She looked directly into the camera lens. "To the board members of Apex who are watching this. We have a meeting at 9:15 a.m. Don't be late, and wear comfortable shoes. We have a lot of work to do." 6 months later. The world moves fast, but the impact of Flight 404 lasted. Arthur Harrington's wife divorced him 2 weeks after the flight. The video of him mocking Serafina was cited in the divorce papers as evidence of cruel and arrogant character. He was currently managing a small car rental branch in New Jersey. Brenda Taggart pleaded guilty to assault to avoid jail time. She was placed on the FAA's no-fly list, not as a flight attendant, but as a passenger. She would never step foot on an airplane again. And Apex Horizon, it was gone. In its place was Nebula Air. The livery was repainted in deep midnight blue and silver. The uniforms were redesigned to be modern and comfortable. But the biggest change was the culture. Serafina Dubois, staying true to her word, had fired the entire executive leadership team. She replaced them with a diverse board of experts who actually flew commercial. One rainy Tuesday morning, Serafina was walking through JFK Terminal 4 again. She was wearing a suit this time, sharp and tailored, but she still wore her old sneakers. She approached the gate. Standing there was Sarah, the young flight attendant who had been terrified 6 months ago. Sarah was now a purser, wearing the new Nebula Air wings. "Good morning, Ms. Dubois," Sarah smiled, scanning the boarding pass. "Seat 1A is ready for you." "Thanks, Sarah," Serafina smiled back. As she walked down the jet bridge, she saw a young man in a hoodie arguing with a gate agent. The agent was getting frustrated. "I'm telling you, my ticket is valid," the boy was saying. Serafina stopped. She tapped the agent on the shoulder. "Is there a problem?" Serafina asked. He doesn't look like he belongs in this zone, ma'am," the agent said, nervous to be speaking to the CEO. Serafina looked at the boy. He looked scared. He looked exactly how she had felt. "Check his ticket again," Serafina commanded gently. "And remember the 7-minute rule." The 7-minute rule? "It takes 7 minutes to destroy a reputation," Serafina said, looking at the agent. "And it takes 7 minutes to change a life. Choose which one you want to do." The agent swallowed hard. He typed in the name. The light turned green. "Welcome aboard, sir," the agent said, handing the pass back. The boy looked at Serafina. "Thanks." "Don't thank me," Serafina winked. "Just own the room." She turned and walked onto her plane. She had 8,000 employees, a fleet of 400 jets, and the respect of the entire industry. But as she sat in 1A and looked out the window, she knew the most valuable thing she owned wasn't the airline. It was the knowledge that nobody would ever look down on her again without risking the sky falling on their heads. The engines roared, the plane lifted off, and Serafina Dubois finally fell asleep. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Serafina Dubois turned a moment of humiliation into a billion-dollar empire. She didn't just get mad, she got ownership. It's a brutal reminder that you never truly know who you are talking to. That quiet person in the hoodie, they might be the CEO. That person you're cutting off in traffic, they might hold the deed to your house. We live in a world where we are so quick to judge based on appearance, on clothes, on skin color. But as Serafina proved, true power doesn't need to shout. True power moves in silence, and when it strikes hard. Arthur Harrington and Brenda Taggart learned the hard way that karma isn't just a concept. Sometimes it's a woman with a cell phone and a bank account that can ground a fleet. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged by how you were dressed? Have you ever had a pretty woman moment where you proved everyone wrong? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this story of justice served ice cold, please do me a favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that bell. We have a story coming up next week about a homeless man who found a winning lottery ticket and the shop owner who tried to steal it. You do not want to miss the twist in that one. Until next time, stay humble, stay kind, and remember, be careful who you kick off the plane. They might just own it before you land. Peace.